Subcommittee, once we ditch this mic. So just for those of you online, we have Bruce Clarkson in the room, myself, Chris Hughes. For the councillors, we have Jennifer Nicol online, and that seems to be about that. So as you're well aware, the Submissions Committee meets when we have something to present that's not going to have time to go through Stratton poll and back to the council. And so today we're meeting over the water bill, which is the second part, and this is the water services legislation bill. Just a little bit, it doesn't have a big component of regional council input in the fact that a lot of this doesn't affect the assets that we actually have as a regional council, but I'm sure as staff outline that and you'll be well aware of that fact. So I'd just like to start with that karakia, and Tracy, if I can get you to do that, please.
No worries. Whakataka te hau ki te uru, whakataka te hau ki te tōna, kia mā kina ki utu, kia mā taratara ki tai. I hi aki ana te atakura, hi teo, hi huka, hi hauhu, te hei mauri ora.
Thank you, Tracy. Apologies, we have one apology, Councillor Story, and that's for an absence, possibly just lateness and possibly an early departure. There was nothing else, nobody else. I'll move that be accepted in a seconder. Thank you, Bruce.
I'm happy to second as well.
Sorry, what was that, Councillor Nicol?
I'm happy to second if, because Bruce, are you a member or are you an alternate for this one? Does it matter? Sorry, got to check this.
I'm the alternate because Pamela's at a different meeting, so I'm here
right
today. You've just got me, sorry.
Amazing. Okay, I'm happy to move the confirmation of the agenda after that made me talking worthwhile. Thank you.
Thank you. All those in favour related to the apologies? Any against? So carried. Confirmation of the agenda, that the agenda of the meeting of the Submission Subcommittee 14th of February 2023 as circulated be confirmed as business for the meeting, and that the meeting may sit longer than 2 hours continuously and continue longer than 6 hours, including adjournments. So moved, Councillor Nicol, seconded Councillor Hughes. All those in favour? Aye. Against? So carried. Right, we'll now move on to the staff part of the afternoon. Thank you, Tracy.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. As the Chair alluded to in the introduction to the meeting, we are looking at the two water services bills, Water Services Bill number 2 and Water Services Bill number 3. One of those we did not choose to submit on as it was very much focused on some commercial matters that were very specific to the entities. With us today we have Annika Hamilton, who will be presenting, who is supported by Alejandro, her team leader. We also have Hugh Keane. You may or may not have met Hugh. Hugh is a team leader in our resource use director and has spent many years working with our TAs, I guess, Hugh, on wastewater treatment and a lot of those infrastructure things that will soon look to be transferred to a water service entity. And online we have Thomas Wilding, Team Leader Water and Science, and JP, who is also a policy advisor who works in Alejandro's team. So without labouring the point, we'll pass over to Annika to take us through the high points of the submission and then respond to any queries. Annika.
Thank you, Tracy.
One moment, Annika.
Don't turn it off, leave it on the entire time.
Okay, so we're good now. If the Chair's happy for me to do so, I'll just summarise our submission first before taking questions. So this submission is on the Water Services Legislation Bill, as already mentioned, and that forms part of this Three Waters Reform Programme. So the Three Waters Reform Programme was launched with the purpose of significantly improving the safety, quality, resilience, accessibility, and the performance of three water services. So those services being drinking water, wastewater, and stormwater. The Water Services Entities Act was the first component of this reform, and it received royal assent in December last year. So this was the act that established those 4 water services entities who are going to provide the drinking water, wastewater and stormwater services from 1 July 2024. This second bill, the Water Services Legislation Bill, which is the subject of our submission today, it sets out the powers and functions of those 4 entities, and those powers and functions are necessary for them to deliver the water services in place of the territorial authorities. It's essentially an omnibus bill, so it amends various pieces of legislation throughout. It includes mechanisms to transfer water supply, wastewater and stormwater assets and liabilities to these new entities. It provides legal powers for the new entities to charge households and businesses for water services, and there are numerous other functions within it, such as designating controlled drinking water catchment areas, making stormwater management plans and stormwater network rules, developing trade waste plans, and setting restrictions on water use and so on. The third bill is the Water Services Economic Efficiency and Consumer Protection Bill. That was also introduced to Parliament at the same time as the Water Services Legislation Bill. Forgive me, there's a few words in there. And this one essentially implements the economic regulation and consumer protection for the regime. Our draft submission, as Tracy's alluded to, does not address this bill, as it doesn't address any of the functions and responsibilities of regional council. So our submission on the Water Services Legislation Bill, it's reasonably brief because the bill does not substantially impact the roles and responsibilities of regional councils. Waikato Regional Council does not own or partially own water supplies that are covered by the components of the bill. And I just also highlight that infrastructure used by Regional Council as river and flood management scheme operators is outside the scope of the Three Waters reform. So to highlight a couple of our key submission points, the submission supports the provisions in the bill requiring engagement with Regional Council, but it requests that any new roles and responsibilities are accompanied by appropriate funding and implementation guidance. The submission highlights the importance of aligning the provisions and outcomes in this bill with the resource management system reform. It seeks to further define stormwater network. Stormwater network currently includes green water infrastructure in the definition, and it also includes overland flow paths. This submission seeks to include artificial watercourses as well to make it really clear that natural receiving environments aren't captured in the definition of stormwater network, which will clearly delineate Regional Council's role from a water services entity. The bill gives the water services entities powers to undertake work on land if it's necessary or desirable to do so, and the submission notes that this is a broad power and recommends that the word desirable is removed. It also seeks to remove the proposed clause 95H in the bill, as this has the potential to make a water services entity an affected party in most resource consent applications, which we assume is an unintended consequence, resulting in an increase in limited notifications. Finally, another key point we're raising is that the bill should incorporate requirements to have regard to the emissions reduction plan and the National Adaptation Plan. Happy to now take questions.
Thank you, Annika. We'll go to Bruce.
Yeah, I'm interested in the definition of natural environments, receiving environments, because in Hamilton City here, large amount of stormwater is piped directly off people's properties into Hamilton gullies. And I would have thought that they were natural environment.
So, sorry, through you, Mr. Chair, my understanding, so overland flow paths, if that's what you're referring to, are included as part of the storm water network. But the definition of green water infrastructure does refer to it being infrastructural engineered processes. So our submission is to really make it clear that, for example, rivers and streams that are a natural confluence aren't covered as a stormwater network, and therefore we would be controlling the discharges to natural receiving environments and the water services entity would be controlling discharges into a stormwater network.
So these are not overland flows. So people put pipes down from their downpipe, they dig downwards and outwards and run pipes to the base of the gully. So how does that fit?
To you, Mr. Chair, so our understanding is from the controls that we have currently, we ask for district councils, Hamilton City included, to produce comprehensive catchment and storm water management plans as part of the comprehensive resource consent. Even though they control the way the water moves in some of those areas, and when the building consents are granted, we still control the discharges that are done into those natural water bodies. So essentially, if you were to replace the territorial authorities, the powers that we have as a regional council will still remain the same, and it's us controlling the discharges to that natural environment. And as part of the more comprehensive way in which we do it, which is not strictly statutory, through those management plans that we ask district councils to prepare, we'll still be doing that.
Yeah, so in other words, natural receiving environments are currently not really protected.
Through the chair, may I ask you to clarify what you mean by not really protected?
So that's a natural receiving environment, and in essence, it's not getting the protection that you're seeking here in relation to other natural environments.
So if I'm following correctly through you, Mr. Chair, in terms of it's not looking at protection as such, it's looking at the roles and responsibilities of a water services entity in managing the stormwater network. And I think where our concern is making sure that the roles are clearly delineated so that we can carry on our work.
So you're seeking to retain the control as opposed to have somebody else take it over.
Correct.
I think that's the crux of it from what I'm hearing.
Yep.
Councillor Clarkson. Councillor Hughes?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Not sure whether I'm outside our remit on this, but we're taking the stance that that these changes will have no impact on the Regional Council. The last two bills, I'm not sure which one it is, has introduced the concept of charging, fining and all that sort of thing. And I've heard on the grapevine that it's logical that regional councils, because of their rating systems and databases, are the logical people to take responsibility for charging for the use of water and for fining people and collecting the fines, etc. And also included in the bill is a horrible little twist in the tail that I'm sure not many people are aware of, is that all ratepayers will become collectively liable for the bills, if you like, the obligations, long-term and short-term obligations of these new water entities, limited to the region within which entity you're being supplied by the services. If that is the case, then I would want to be a lot stronger in terms of our submission on, if we are going to be responsible for that aspect of the business, that we need to ensure that we will be rewarded for that effort. As far as I'm aware, the bills are silent on this aspect apart from the onerous obligations.
I'll hand over to Tracy just to clarify, which piece of this it comes under. I suspect possibly the next one.
Yeah, through you, Mr. Chair, this bill purposefully doesn't respond to any of the funding or the charging of the use of water. If that was to occur and if that was to, shall we say, be gifted to the regional council, we would have to go through a consultation process, because that would be a change to our funding, our responsibilities. I have not heard that is in the, no pun intended, pipeline in the immediate future. It is something that I understand the entities, once they have been stood up, will look at the most effective way of funding their business. I think that would be a significant sector conversation if the funding was to land it or be expected to be from centre, from the regional council. We could include reference to that in the submission, just being very clear that from our council's perspective, if there was to be any subsequent discussions on funding, where the regional council would be involved, then we would expect a high degree of consultation with that. As you said in your introduction, it's a bit outside the remit of this particular submission, but it's part of the future landscape that we need to be across.
Thank you, Tracy. One question I had is just around the wording of making sure that artificial watercourses are in the bill, following on from Councillor Clarkson's comments there. I just wonder if we shouldn't have some stronger wording around that to make sure those natural receiving areas are not included in it. Basically, I'm looking at point 12, I think, in the actual submission, where we recommend that the definition of stormwater network includes artificial watercourses. I think something a bit stronger, perhaps, just to make sure our position is clear around that, and then that allows us the ability to then look after those areas outside of this.
If I can just, Mr. Chair, in terms of some of those natural watercourses, those gully systems that Councillor Clarkson was alluding to, they do form part of the wider stormwater management system. They are part of that system, as Alejandro said. They are a functioning part of the wider integrated stormwater catchment plan. I guess what we're saying, and they would actually be covered by other rules in terms of their modification and their protection. So what we're saying here, and this is something we ran into, I guess, with Plan Change 1 around rivers and our discharging into those rivers by virtue of our flooding network. We shouldn't be responsible for some of the water that's travelling through the network. While we manage the network, there is a whole lot of people who are feeding into that. So for me, it was this submission really clarifying what we're talking about in terms of artificial watercourses and being very clear about that, because I suspect there's going to be a bit of legislation tripping over one another. Perhaps what the submission needs to do is recognise the function of natural watercourses in the wider stormwater management network. I'm not sure if the bill in fact does that in any way, shape or form. It's probably silent.
I think my understanding is it's silent on that. Yes.
Thank you. Councillor Clarkson?
Sorry.
Any other questions for Annika at this stage? No, we seem to be silent on that as well. Tracy, anything else then?
No, nothing further. I think just one observation I'd make in reviewing the report, it's very evident that this bit of legislation has been developed in isolation from the RM system. There are a couple of cursory hooks in, and from our perspective, one of the advocacy lines of this council has always been that integrated approach to legislation. So we've spent a bit of time here making sure that the two connect. I just wanted to highlight this as a curse of the non-integrated reform program, that we're falling over ourselves a little bit.
Yes, Councillor Clarkson.
Yes, look, I mean, although I've asked those earlier questions, of course, I have noted that item 13 is like the backstop in your submission, and I really commend item 13, because what it's essentially saying is one bit of legislation shouldn't be tripping over another. And you've covered that well, and you've basically sought the solution. So I think it does cover some of those earlier questions that we were asking. We just asked them to get a bit of clarity, because we don't know what all these these definitions actually mean, and you've helped clarify them, but I really like item 13 in this submission.
Well pointed out, Councillor Clarkson. Well, if there's no other questions, we'll go to the motions on the table. I'll do it in two parts. So first, sorry. I can get rid of the middle one, don't you?
No, I think that committee endorses.
Yeah.
So,
That's my
sorry,
feeling for the room.
sorry, Jen. I think what we stick with is that the committee endorses the water services legislation bill, incorporating additional comments. From members, and comment including reference to transfer of charging or potential transfer of charging powers.
Of charging powers, transfer
Of charging powers. And I think if we just put something in there around increased visibility of the matters raised in paragraph 13. And through Mr. Chair, there are a couple of ways we can do that, including them in the summary points and in the highlighted submission box that sits above paragraph 9.
Before we go to the vote, I'll just go back to Councillor Clarkson. Oh, I won't go back to Councillor Clarkson. So we will now do this as one piece. And you can see it there before you. I will quickly read it out, that the report submission on the Water Services Legislation Bill Submission Subcommittee 14th February 2023 be received, and that the committee endorses the proposed submission on the Water Services Legislation Bill, incorporating additional comments from the members, including reference to potential transfer of charging powers, increase visibility of matters arising in point 13 of the submission. Increasing visibility.
Through you, Mr. Chair, we can tidy that up. Essentially what we're saying in the second part is taking into consideration matters raised by Councillor Hughes and Councillor Clarkson, and we will tidy that up.
Thank you, Tracy. So if I can have a mover and a seconder. Councillor Nicol.
Right, yeah, it was just to get my chance to say thank you to the staff for the submission. I do really like the holistic nature of it, and the comments that we've added here add to it as well. So thank you for everyone involved. In particular as well, obviously noting that last one around reminding them that since some of the reasons they quote around this reform being to adapt to climate change, to really bring in that National Adaptation Plan and Emission Reduction Plan reference. Thank you. And happy to second. I think somebody already moved.
No, we will have you as the mover and a seconder. Thank you, Councillor Hughes. All those in favour? Aye. Any opposed? So carried. So we'll just finish off. I will go back to Tracy for the closing karakia. Thank you.
Kia ora. Unuhia mai ti uru tapinoi. Kia wātea, kia māma, ti ngākau, ti tinana, ti hingi ngaro. E ti ara takatu, hoi ara e rongo, e whakaerea aki ki runga. Kia tēnā, Tēnā, huie, tākia.
Thank you, Tracy. Just a closing comment. Once again, I'd like to echo Jennifer's comments as well. Just thank you very much, staff, for a comprehensive and well tabled report. Thank you. Meeting closed at 2:26 p.m.